So I'm Jane Andrews. I'm a San Diego League member. Beryl, do you want to say a word about yourself?
Yes, I'm chair of the Immigration and Deportation Committee here at the San Diego League, and a past president. And so we're very excited to be able to share what we're learning with you. If you are interested in keeping up with this topic, just put your email address and name into the chat, and we'll add you to our emails that go out to the committee. You don't necessarily have to come to the committee meetings, but we usually have a speaker, so we'd love to have you join us.
Excuse me, I'm trying to, oh, there, okay. I was just trying to get into chat.
Good.
If you have questions, please put them in the chat, and then we'll call on you that way.
Yeah, and also you don't necessarily have to have a question. If you want to speak, just say, I have something I'd like to say. When we are planning to do a PowerPoint, which we want to get through fairly quickly, so then we have plenty of time to talk, and we may not be able to see the questions during that time, but we'll get to it. So there's one other person I want to have introduce themselves, who is Dana Freehoff, also from the San Diego League. Dana, can you say hello? There she is. Dana is a legislative analyst for the League of California on the subject of immigration. And do you want to say a little more about yourself, Dana?
Yeah, thanks, Jane. Thank you. My name is Dana, and I'm on the advocacy team for the League of Women Voters of California, handling bills related to our immigrant community. As you know, at the state level, we don't handle immigration law. That's at the federal level. So what California tries to do is enact laws that, that ensure that our immigrants are treated humanely and such. So with healthcare and protections. So I've been covering that. Now, as you know, as far as the legislation goes, it's not a priority for the League. So we are limited to the bills that I can analyze and get them to support. But I can talk a little bit about that later. So thanks.
Great. Okay, well, so I want to also start with a little disclaimer that Beryl and I are reasonably well-informed people, but we're not experts. There may be things you all know better than we do. But we're going to cover a few things. I'm going to give a little bit of the current situation since the Biden inauguration, some of the data, as well as a little bit of background just to ground us. Beryl's going to talk at some length about what's going on in San Diego and at the border, and then I will do some discussion about federal and state legislation. And we did, there is a resource list that we put together of organizations, federal, state, and border that we think have been very helpful to us, are worthy organizations. So we hope you'll be able to grab that. Sharon Stone was going to put it in the chat, but it was also in the invitation. And we have links to all of their websites. Okay, so with that, I'm going to share my screen and off we go. Okay. So let me just get onto this. All right, come on. All right. Can everybody see this? Yes, good, okay. Any rate, we titled this Immigration 2021, Hope versus Reality, because I think we all started the year off with a lot of hope that the Biden administration would make some changes, but there's been some tough realities we've been up against. Hold on. So a little word on the current status of immigration issues. as the San Diego League, have a very keen interest because we're on the border and our region is really binational. And so since January 22 of this year, we've had a lot of hope for changes, but there's just been so much flux and uncertainty, so many changing issues all the time. And it leaves a lot of confusion for people who are in limbo at the border. So this picture to me kind of summarized a lot of the spirit of what we're feeling at the border here. There are just so many people who would like to get in. Wait a sec. So I wanted to ground us with a little bit of background on, league positions, because we are bound by this too. So these are longstanding League of Women Voters US positions. One is promoting reunification of families, meeting economic and business and employment needs, being responsive to those facing persecution or humanitarian crises, provide for student visas, ensure fair treatment under the law for all persons, and in transition to a reform system, support provisions for unauthorized immigrants already in the country to earn legal status. So this was a statement that the League of US League came out with in January, that it did support comprehensive immigration reform, path to citizenship for dreamers, temporary protected status holders, and essential workers and their families, reduce detention, and protect the basic human rights of immigrants. So another just immigration basics. People may already know all of this, but I think it just helps ground us. So there are many avenues to get in. One is a temporary visa, work, travel, and student. Another is a guest worker visa for H-1A, H-2B, which is seasonal workers, and the numbers for that were increased in 2021. And then the H-1B, which is for special skills. The green card residency visa, which requires family or employer sponsorship. And then there's the investor program. If you have $1.8 million to invest in a US business, you can get in. And I know in many parts of the country, some wealthy Chinese have gotten in this way in order to get their children educated. The whole asylum process, we will go into more later because that's such a hot topic, but the credible fear assessment process and legal process is an important part of that. And then refugee status is yet another avenue. And citizenship, the process of naturalization can start after 5 years. Okay, so, and these are the agencies that are involved. There are so many different paths, once again. The Homeland Security runs citizenship and immigration, handles Customs and Border Patrol, which regulates the borders. And then there's Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, which handles the interior. And that's the border within 100 miles of the border. So that's most of California. Then the Department of Justice has the Executive Office for Immigration Review. So they run the immigration courts as well as the Board of Appeals. And that's a big part of this picture too. And with the unaccompanied children that we've seen lately, the Office of Refugee Resettlement under Department of Health and Human Services is also a major organization these days. So in Biden's first 100 days, there were 94 executive actions. So I think he's been trying to do a lot with the executive action approach. So ICE has narrowed the focus of its arrests so that it's more focuses on national security and public safety risks. And we'll have a graph to show you something on that later. Travel and visas, Biden ended the Muslim ban and increased guest workers. Under humanitarian protection, Venezuela and Myanmar were added to the temporary protected status list, and then later Haiti. Under immigrant basic needs, Biden ended the public charge rule. Under border policy, he ended the MPP, remain in so-called migrant protection protocol, remain in Mexico, but it's being processed very, very slowly. And then he has not expelled unaccompanied children under Title 42, and I'll explain a little more about Title 42 later. So this is a graph that we thought really showed the sharp decrease in arrests since January. So this is under Biden, a sharp decrease through March because of the different protocols that he has given, instructions he has given ICE, essentially. Whereas, back in earlier years, it was more like 12,000 a month, very high. So this is a map or a chart that shows also the increased arrivals at the border. So we have January, February, we only have it through March or through April, but very sharp increase up to 78. Oops, got to go backwards. There we go. Up to 178,000 encounters, and but 63% of them were expelled back to Mexico. I think the border was not open by any means. So the next one, there is a history of an increase in arrivals at the border in February and March before the desert gets too hot. So all these little pink arrows here it does show some uptick at those times. And then of course, over here with Biden, there's been an enormous uptick, and the division into single adults, family members in green, and then unaccompanied children. Okay, so, got to keep admitting people. So under asylum seekers, so asylum officers review each person that presents at ports of entry and determine whether the case demonstrates credible fear of persecution. And roughly 14% of applicants have actually been granted asylum in recent years once they go through all the court process. The migrant protection protocols, the prior administration policy, led to just an enormous court backlog for asylum seekers, roughly 1.3 million cases with only 500 judges. There are an estimated 71,000 awaiting in Mexico and 14,000 in Tijuana. Under Title 42, which I believe most of you have probably heard of, but this has been, since COVID, it's been used particularly by the prior administration. So the public health threat of COVID allows immediate expulsion without a hearing. Now, there's been a lot of advocacy on this because COVID has been declining, and the ACLU does have a very active lawsuit on this matter. But so far, Biden has only been willing to make very narrow changes, that there've been just 250 a day admissions that were humanitarian issues. There is an effort to build larger processing centers to move the asylum process along more quickly, and we can talk more about that. So unaccompanied minors. So Biden, as you know, there's been a very large increase in recent months, and Biden has not been expelling them. And Mexico does not have shelter space for them, which is one of the reasons Biden has not been expelling them. So the rule is that they must be moved from Customs and Border Patrol within 72 hours to Department of Health and Human Service or Office of Refugees Resettlement Temporary Shelter. And then they're offered help in locating relatives or sponsors or help with an asylum case. So as of April, the average time in the temporary shelter was 30 days. The numbers have been leveling off, I'd say. They certainly have been processing people better through the Customs and Border Patrol custody. But there are still 11,500 children in HHS or refugee resettlement custody in May. It came down from 16,000, but they're trying to process them as quickly as they can. Now, refugees are a whole other avenue for entry that involves a much more detailed process with involvement of the UN High Commission for Refugees, the State Department, Homeland Security checks and interviews, a domestic resettlement process, and assistance by the federal government, some financial assistance. Under Trump, there was quite a decline in the number of refugees that were allowed, 30,000 in 2019, 18,000 in 2020. Biden originally kept his numbers down, but has agreed to 62,500 for 2021. But this is a drastic reduction. In the past, we admitted as many as 230,000 refugees, and there are many that are waiting internationally. So this, I think, is a useful chart. It shows, what the annual ceiling was back in 1980, and then it's come down and came way down in the Trump phase. It's gone back up now with Biden, but I didn't have a graph that showed that. But, the question is, should we admit more under this avenue? Okay, Beryl, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Jane. That was terrific. So as you know, Trump limited the admissions through the border drastically. And so they've all been lined up there. And we're seeing a slow rate of admission now. It started at 30 people a day and we're up to 250 now at the ports of entry. So if you try to cross the border between the ports of entry, that's a crime. But if you come and speak to the Border Patrol and ask to be admitted as an asylum seeker and you have a credible fear, you have a chance, but they're still holding a lot of people in Tijuana.
Sorry.
Okay, so once people arrive in San Diego, we have a shelter called the Rapid Response Shelter, which is operated by Jewish Family Services. They've got about 700 people per day that they're housing in 5 hotels, feeding 3 meals a day, giving them legal advice and health checkups and food and clothes and everything. So it's a terrific organization, but it's funded by county, state, and donors, not by the federal government. The people who cross between the borders, next slide. Oh, all right, here's
Wait a sec. This is where we want to be, I think.
yeah. Here's a picture of what's called El Chaparral. It's a camp out right at the border crossing. I learned this morning that you can't even walk across the border at this place. The shelters in Tijuana, of which there are many, are overwhelmed with all these people lined up ready to come into the US. The Mexican government doesn't help much. These people didn't even have toilets for a couple of months until Border Angels went down and requested them. And now they're being cleaned once a week. So you can imagine there are 2,000 people using them. In addition to people waiting to come to the US, the, excuse me, there are largely men and families with US citizen children who are being deported. And some of them are staying in Tijuana and are being reassimilated. Next slide. People who cross the border between the ports of entry are often put in detention. And the top picture is the Otay Mesa Detention Center. 80% of these centers are run by private companies that make a profit off them. And medical conditions are not so good. The food is not so good. They're really in there for the long haul, and then they get a bail. So Border Angels is trying to get people out by paying their bail. Next slide.
Sorry, I'm just learning how to do this.
Okay. You may not know that veterans are also deported. If they joined the military before they became citizens, they're offered an expedited citizenship, but for various reasons, they didn't get it. And when they were discharged honorably and then had PTSD or traumatic brain injury, and then got into trouble with the law, they've been jailed locally, and then the jails are turning those names over to ICE. Luckily in San Diego and in California, hopefully we'll stop this practice. There's a bill in the legislature now we'll talk about later. So in Baja, there are several hundred deported veterans. Our committee works directly with one of these groups of deported veterans, the Unified U.S. Deported Veterans, and they are promoting this bill in Congress, but the League can't really support that. Next slide. The border is 1,954 miles long with only 776 miles of wall. So there are ways to get around the wall, obviously, and Trump replaced and reinforced 350 miles of it, including some in San Diego, and he built 50 new miles of wall. But Biden has halted the wall construction now and is favoring electronic surveillance. Next slide. Here's some pictures of the wall. The top left shows the wall going from bottom to top. And on the Mexican side is a bull ring, and Friendship Park is right next to it, right near the ocean. On the US side, it's mainly wetlands and park. On the right, you can see people looking through the fence. You see how tall it is compared to the height of the people. On the bottom left, you'll see the difference between an older wall and a new wall. And on the bottom right, you see painting and messages that are put on the Mexican side of the wall in what's called Friendship Park. Next slide. So Friendship Park has been there a long time. The idea was to allow people to communicate between the two countries. And actually up in Canada, they have open parks where you can do that. So the Friends of Friendship Park is trying to get more openness down here. Before COVID, they had on the weekends, the Border Patrol would open one of the fences and allow people to touch fingers and talk to people on both sides of the border. But that's been closed and they're not about to open it. They're short of staff. They only have 9,000 people working here in San Diego. Next slide. In San Diego, we've had big changes in our local government. Both the mayor and the board of supervisors are dominated by Democrats, and the council is almost all Democrats now. So we've been able to get more humanitarian aid for migrants. The county passed a public defender program for detainees, and this morning they're voting on proposing an Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs. However, in Chula Vista, which is one of the largest cities in California, they are allowing automatic license plate readers. And once the police know your license plate number, they know who the driver or owner of the car is, and they can tell whether they're a different race or maybe undocumented. So there's concern that people will be picked up for the wrong reasons. Another issue at our border is the Tijuana River, which flows right at the border. And a lot of sewage and garbage is dumped into it and goes into the ocean. So the beaches are closed on a regular basis. The EPA has promised $300 million, but we don't know what they're going to do with it exactly yet. Next slide. We have several organizations that work in San Diego with migrants, and this is just a small list. But Border Angels drops water, food, and clothing in the desert and pays for bail for detainees and supports shelters in Tijuana and gives some legal and practical help. Their chair is Dulce Garcia. She's a DACA recipient and a wonderful speaker if you want one. Jewish Family Services, we've talked about, and they have a legal department as well and do many other things. VIA International is working on both sides of the border, doing microloans and training people to start a business and be more self-sufficient while they live in Tijuana. Right now, they're feeding the people at El Chaparral, along with other nonprofits. And legal assistance comes from ACLU. Al Otro Lado is working on both sides of the border, mainly in Tijuana. And Casa Cornelia works with children, giving legal assistance to all the children. Next slide. Our committee has been going for about 5 years. We started with a border tour, actually connected to the state convention in 2016. And we have continued to do border tours and meet with members of Congress about our thoughts on immigration, not specific bills. We support some of the families in shelters. We've had some parties in shelters, and we also have supported a Thanksgiving dinner for deportees. So a top picture is the buffet line for that last year. We do a lot of education for both our committee members and our league members and the public. And we usually have a speaker at each of our meetings. Our next meeting, by the way, is Thursday morning at 9. So I'll get you on the email list right away, those that want to be on it. And advocacy, we've been doing more with the local issues that are coming before the council and the county. And we are supporting the current legislation in the state for bills that are supported by the state league. And we also endorse Biden's immigration plan when he first came into office. Next slide. And we're back to Jane.
So I'm going to wrap it up just to summarize some of what's going on with federal legislation. I think I was more hopeful about this when Biden came in than I am now, but so when Biden first came into office, he did put forward the U.S. Citizenship Act, which would be an 8-year path to citizenship. It didn't seem like it was very likely to go forward, but I think it was at least putting down a marker of what he thought should happen. There are several incremental steps that I think, and some legislative watchdogs think have more promise. So one is the Dream and Promise Act, the DACA. In March, it did pass the House with 9 Republican votes, but they haven't taken it to the Senate yet. I think with all the problems at the border, I think probably it just isn't the right moment to take it forward to the Senate, but I believe they will try to do that sometime later this year. And then a second one is the Farm Worker Modernization Act. And this is an act that would give farm workers who have been in the country a long time and some guest workers citizenship. It also has a requirement to make more use of E-Verify. And this is to help meet the need for farm workers throughout the country, not just in our state. So interestingly, this did pass, but with 34 Republican votes, which suggested there may be more traction with this one.
And Jane, just to remind you that as individuals, you can support these federal bills. Your league can't, but you can. Okay.
Although I think that the U.S. League is supporting the Dream and Promise Act. I don't know where they stand on the farm worker, but yeah, it's a tricky situation of needing to know what the National League is doing on these issues before one's own league can jump in. But the other one I wanted to mention was Senator Padilla has just put forward a pathway to citizenship for essential workers, which is a worthy idea, but I don't think it has much traction. So a couple of Republican proposals, Senators Cornyn and Sinema have put forward their act, which does give more funding to the border to build asylum processing centers, but it also would revise the credible fear criteria for asylum seekers to make it tougher. And then finally, Lindsey Graham wants to set up processing centers for asylum seekers in other countries. So I put together this chart based on a survey done by the Bipartisan Policy Center in Washington that they put out just this May. They had done a survey to look at where there was some similarity between Democrats and Republicans and where the differences were. So the blue section is where there is more congruence, that the interest, even the Republicans have an interest in getting visas to support the US economy. They're interested in visas for investors in research and in innovation. Some support for refugees and asylum seekers, but that may be the places where some legislation can occur. But the differences still are great. And I listened to the Senator Padilla had a hearing on his essential workers bill in the Department of Justice just a month ago. And the Republicans were just very staunch about no amnesty, use E-Verify, and very interested in technology to prevent people from overstaying their visas. So this is where the divide is. So California legislation, I'm just going to give a little summary and maybe get Dana Freehoff to say a little more. So in 2016, we had the Truth Act, which in California regulates when interviews are requested by ICE. But then in 2017, the California Value Act really prevents state and local law enforcement agencies from using their personnel to help arrest persons for immigration. And it also upholds the state decision to be a sanctuary state. And that, I know in San Diego, we have to keep pushing to make sure our local agencies follow this. Now, in process, there are at least three bills that the League of California supports. One is SB 56. Dana, if you're willing to jump in at this point, would you like to explain these three?
Sure. Yeah, thank
Great.
you. So the first one is SB 56. And right now, if you're undocumented, you can get some Medi-Cal services, but they're only emergency type services. And so this bill would provide full scope Medi-Cal for seniors. Initially, the bill, this is Durazo out of Los Angeles, and she had 65 years and older. But Governor Newsom in his May revise to the budget has lowered that to 60. So in his budget, and so she went back and revised her bill. So it would provide healthcare services for all, undocumented folks 60 and over. Now there's also some of the legislators are wanting that to be lowered even further to 50. But right now it would be 60 and above. And this bill has passed through the Senate. So it's now on the Assembly side. So this is good news. The second bill, AB 937, the Vision Act, as mentioned here, it builds on the Values Act. And what we're finding now is that when a immigrant has served their time and they say they've got, and even they have legal permanent status, if they've served their time, they've committed a crime, they served their time, they're on parole, that once they are released from state prison, let's say, they can, the state authorities can immediately transfer them to ICE and have them deported. So this bill would preclude state authorities, those state agencies from immediately turning over these people that have served their time to ICE and allow them to be reunited with their community. And so this gives them the time to be reunited with their family, and perhaps, get their necessary legal, legal representation to help them. So through their potential deportation process. So it just further reinforces the original Values Act. AB, and this bill too passed through the Assembly. So now it's on to the state Senate. So that's good news also. The third bill, as Jane had mentioned earlier, there's a difference between how a refugee comes into our country and how basically asylum seeker at the border. Right now you're a refugee, and let's say you're from Syria and you go through the process through the UN, and you are given a case manager when you arrive in the US to help you through the process to get the benefits that you need. But when asylum is granted to an asylee, and because they've come over the border, they are not given that case manager, and so it shows that they and so therefore they don't take advantage of the programs like they should. So this bill basically just provides a case manager to asylees similar to refugees. And again, this bill has also gone through the Assembly and it's on to the Senate. So if your local leagues, it'd be great if your local leagues would want to maybe submit a letter, because again, the California League has supported these bills. So your local league could then look at submitting a letter in support of these also. And if you go on the League of Women Voters of California's bill tracking, you can actually get the letter of support if you want to model it exactly the same. So any questions, let me know, but thank you, Jane.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. So let me see. Okay. What can we do? So we thought we'd try to outline, be informed, educate others. I do think, highlighting immigration issues. We provide information on our website and in our newsletter. Advocacy we've covered. Volunteer with organizations. We list many on our resource list, and donations are important as well. So I think we're almost done. So I thought we'd wind up. These are some of the questions that are always on my mind, some of the controversies. We would love to know what your leagues are doing. What is a fair immigration policy? Should preference be given to people with certain skills? I think that's under debate these days. And then, what is a humanitarian border policy? And finally, how do we have a civil conversation when there's been so much hyperbole? So I'm going to stop.
Jane, we have one question so far.
Okay. I want to
From
stop.
Kathy Seltzer.
I'm going to stop sharing so we can actually look at each other more. Yeah. So Catherine Gavsey?
Yes. So our Pasadena Area League also has an immigration committee for about 3 years, because we're not at the border. We're less focused on border issues and more on issues affecting the immigrants living in our communities around us. One thing we have been doing, and that's why I'm just thrilled to discover the existence of Dana, a legislative analyst, is we check the bills of interest page on the State League website every month, looking for where the State League has actually supported something so that we can then get our members out to do that too. We would love to be in more frequent communication with you, Dana, now that we know who you are. And I assume there's an email address we can use for you. For a long time, we would check and there would be all these pending bills, and it always said the league is following. And then all of a sudden, we started just these past 3 bills, we started seeing support. And I guess that's due to you. So thank you very much for being there. I urge other leagues to do the same thing, is we just check frequently to see if State League has taken a position. And then we do letter writing and so on about that. And then if I could just, I don't want to take too much time, but you did say, what does your league do?
Yeah.
What we have found very helpful is to identify and work as closely as we can with other organizations in our surrounding communities, focused on immigration-related issues, and specifically those that are from the community itself. And there's one group that is Los Angeles area based, but it may spread farther, I don't know, called CHIRLA, the Committee for Humane Immigration. Yeah, we have done a number of combined sponsorships with them and worked as partners on advocacy. They have a petition going right now to the Biden administration and Congress for improved, renewed humane immigration. We looked at the petition. We came to the conclusion all on our own that it was supported enough by the general national position. And so we told our members to sign on, and they did. There is also a group nationwide, very large in California, and I can put this in the chat if you'd like, called NALEO, the National Association of Latino Elected Officials. They have been very actively working for on the issue of the census, on getting a fair rep, and we partnered with them on that as well. And NALEO has occasional workshops where they provide assistance to people who are applying for citizenship, to help them go through the process of the application. And we volunteered to help at one of those workshops, and we also will at another one. You don't have to have totally fluent Spanish. It's just the ability to help them with the paperwork, help them fill out the documents, help them put their package together, and so on. It's very rewarding work to do. I urge anybody who would like to, because it's one thing we can do well, we sit at tables and we shuffle papers.
So the important thing to know is that ICE has control of 100 miles from all the borders. That's 2/3 of the country in population. So, all right, we have limited time here. We have a couple of questions. One from Kathy Seltzer. You need to unmute yourself, Kathy.
I was going back to see exactly what my question had been
Oh,
at that point. On a separate but quick note, we actually have a NALIA workshop this evening, our Placer County
Good.
group.
oh.
On the other subject, I'm wondering what percent, and I know we don't know that perfectly and maybe not at all, but how many asylum seekers are turned away? And do they remain there and keep trying?
So
I
one
really
of the
want to figure that
problems,
out.
one of the problems with Title 42 is, Biden will take unaccompanied children, but not families. So people are coming to the border, trying to cross, can't cross, and then sending their children unaccompanied. That's got to be a huge decision to make. But a lot of people now are being expelled. They're not even given a credible, fair interview. But
What I wondered.
yeah, most of them. Just 250 a day are coming through the ports of entry.
But I want to add that for those who go all the way through the immigration court process, only about, I've heard 10%, 14%, only 10 to 14% are granted asylum. So it's
That's what I was
it's a
wondering.
tough process. And I think there are those who want to make it tougher, and there are others who want to open that asylum path up more. It seems like a good idea to me, but how do you define and who assesses what the credible fear is? There's been recent talk about having asylum officers make that determination, but many advocates feel that that's not going to give them due process, that it really is a court that has to adjudicate that. But it's not easy to get asylum.
I didn't think it was, and that's why I was wondering.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Remembering we kind of stole their country from them, and now they can't come in, right? That's just my personal opinion. Sorry, we'll leave it out.
Are there other leagues that want to weigh in on what you're doing? It's very interesting just to know what other leagues are up to. Anybody?
One meeting we had, which is easy to pull off. We had about 6 issues, like DACA and unaccompanied children, the courts, ICE, that sort of thing. And people sat around and talked about how things could be better with those different issues. And then we came together and had some concluding remarks. That was a very popular meeting. It wouldn't be hard to pull off. As far as speakers go, if you email me, I put my email address in the chat. I can send you some ideas about speakers, assuming you're using Zoom, because most of our speakers live here. Jane's daughter is one.
Yeah,
So,
thanks. I see Izzy Martinez has a hand up, and
Hi, thank you for letting me speak here. My league, I'm in the Diablo Valley League in the Bay Area. Since we are more than 100 miles away from the border, what other than letter writing for specific bills, is there anything that we can do to support Southern California leagues such as San Diego, Pasadena, Los Angeles, any of the leagues that are here today to help with the efforts that you all have been doing?
well, I'll tell you what we need to do is to get immigration on the front line of the National League. And, most of the country, and frankly, I think National thinks about the northeastern part of the US more than they think about us. is not as involved in immigration as we are, but it's a huge issue and it's very political. And I think if we could get something passed at the next national convention, that would be great.
Good idea. Catherine, you had your hand up.
There are people before me. I know.
Yeah, but
Speaking of national, yeah, two things really quickly. Yes, the convention is always a time. Our committee actually went to the last national convention and tried to bring a resolution to the floor at the plenary meeting to ask the National League, and I think it did go, a National League to take a stronger position in support of the temporary protected groups, given that they were under threat of losing the temporary protection. So it's very important to try to get national focused more on these issues.
Right.
And one federal government issue that we are looking at, and others may have already done research on this, I don't know, is the immigration courts, the amnesty courts, the asylum courts. One, they have nowhere near enough judges to handle the caseload, which is why you've got this incredible backlog, millions.
Yeah.
And two, the courts are under the Justice Department, not what's considered what's called a Title I court, which would be a court, a special court like immigration, and there are others, that is responsive to and is controlled by Congress. So they are under the Justice Department, which has meant for the past 4 years that they were basically not allowed to do anything at all. And had no appeal and no hearing for their needs and their concerns. So we feel strongly that without attention being paid to the asylum courts and giving them enough robust judges and so on, you're just going to continue to have this very inhumane backlog. And we would like to get national to pay attention to this issue too. I was wondering, does anybody know who in National League in the action and advocacy area may be looking into immigration issues?
I did send an email to, I can't remember her name, somebody who is involved in immigration, but I haven't heard back from her.
Yeah,
And I think your idea about the National League is really important. I'm a transplant from Massachusetts, and I think that people on the East Coast really don't understand the farm worker issue, the need, what farm worker life is, the undocumented, and also, Padilla's essential workers bill it has such value, but, it's everybody saying, well, we've just got to draw the line. So given that he's our senator, I want to back him up too, but I guess if we went with a petition to the National League for convention, I think that's something we should really think about. And
maybe we should all reconvene. January would be the time to do it, because that's when they have the program planning for the national convention.
Yeah, well, even December, we should really have it done before Christmas.
And if we get all the people's emails from this caucus.
Yeah, we've got it. We've got all your emails. So
yeah,
we'll be in touch about that.
I think that's a really good direction for us all.
Now, maybe
Dana has her hand up.
All right, let me just say one thing. At the convention this week, see if you can get a resolution to propose this for the National League. I'm not a delegate, but see if you can do that this week.
I'm a delegate. Catherine, are you? No. Okay. Dana, maybe you and I can brainstorm about that a little bit. Okay.
Yeah. If I could just real quick, one of the things, and I apologize, I'm back to the state level now, on the state legislation, is if we could have a statewide group that also looks at legislation, that would be very helpful for me as the analyst to get all your input I use the San Diego committee. I'm a member of that committee on immigration and deportation, but to me, it would be really helpful to get your thoughts, for example, in Pasadena and other areas on what bills are, would work in your community. So we could use that because that's when bills are introduced in about the, January timeframe. So that might be helpful. So thank you.
Yeah. Any other reflections, comments, inspirations?
Just a quick question. I assume your slideshow will be available?
Yes, it's in the chat, the link for it.
Oh, for the show too.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, so
And
if
I believe we're recording this. It said it was recording, and we'll make that available too. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you. Using this as a way to connect with other people who care about this topic and find ways we can all work together, I think is really a terrific outcome. I see we have Veda Flores has a question or a comment.
There, this is Veda Flores, and I'm in Northern California. I think that this is such a valuable tool to come together, and I'm so happy that the Southern California leagues are doing such great work. I attended the border trip that we had in 2006, and I also attended a border link tour, and many of the Marin County league members went to Arizona to take a close hand look. And this was in 2017. And subsequently, I've been doing quite a bit of work myself in other states along the border. And I'm wondering, and I have some great ideas about how we can really be a collective to take action. And, the resources that you mentioned are fabulous. And I think that we have some real traction if we can create an immigration committee and maybe have your recommended speakers. And I'd be happy to help with that if need be.
That's great.
Okay. We'll work on it.
Yeah. And Beryl, you have all the emails from just from the Zoom list, I think. Or we can anyway.
Yeah, I have that. Yeah.
We'll be in touch. I think this is a terrific direction. I feel it's very league-like too, from my point of view. All right.
Sharon Stone, is there a way for people to get the chat?
Yeah, we've got the list of everybody who's registered, so we can always, after this concludes, email out the chat that's been going on, as well as any slides. I don't think I'll have the recording posted as early as today, but we'll get that on the convention website once the whole event concludes next week.
All right. Great. Well, thanks for all your organizing of it all.
It's just
All
one
right.
of many.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Beryl. You've been an inspiration to us all, and I look forward to further contact and collegiality with everybody.
So
Veda, do you have one more comment, or you? No, I guess not.
if you want to help with a state committee, email me, please. edflom@sbcglobal.net.
I didn't see your email address in the,
Yeah, it's in the chat.
it is, I looked.
Maybe put it in again, Beryl, just
Because
at the
there's
bottom.
a million other things in the
Yeah.
chat.
You got it.
That would be great. Yeah, our committee would definitely want to get in touch.
And Catherine, I've got your immigration at LWV-PA, so .org, and that would get to you.
That's the committee's functional email address. So
Okay,
that will get
great.
to everybody on the committee. Thank
Okay,
you.
good.
Fine, Beryl.
All right. Well, it's 1 o'clock. Thank you all for coming. Look forward to seeing you during the week.
Great job, Jane.
Thank you.
Take care.
Great job.
Excellent.